So moving on to chapter 3. This is the meat and potatoes of this class. If you do not get chapter 3, you are in trouble, okay? Because this is the stuff that we are going to use over and over and over and over again. And in fact, a lot of times when people ask, what is the definition of economics, this is what they say it is. It's the study of supply and demand. And to some degree, that's pretty correct, all right? So this chapter is very important, all right? So I'm going to try and take my time and make sure that you get everything that you need to out of this particular chapter. All right. So we are going to start with demand because demand is an easier one for you guys to understand because it is the study of economics from the buyer's perspective. And most of us have bought stuff before. All right. Supply tends to be the opposite side of that coin. Supply is from the producer's perspective, and unless you have owned your own business and produced something, that one's a little bit harder to see, okay? So we're going to start with demand, but realize that there is a flip side to the coin, all right? So the first thing is the law of demand, and this is an immutable law. It is true, period, and you have to accept it. If you do not accept that this law is true, then you need to drop the class and take it from someone else who can convince you it's true. All right, so the idea here is that, let me make sure that I write the proper book definition down. All right, so there is an inverse relationship. Before I move even further past this, what does it mean to have an inverse relationship? Opposite, right? Things are moving in opposite directions. So the two things that I'm going to talk about that represent demand, they're going to be moving in opposite directions. If one goes up, the other one's going to go down. All right? So the two variables that we were working with is going to be price and quantity. I'll write them out in their long forms first, right? The price of a good and the quantity purchased of that good. The other thing that you have to say is that you're going to fix some time period to represent what demand is going to be. In other words, the idea is if the price of a good is $5 a unit, how much are you going to buy in a week? Versus how much are you going to buy in a month versus how much are you going to buy in a year. And as long as you fix a time period, that demand stays fixed. This is a theory, even though I'm calling it a law. What must we end everything in economics with when we have a theory? Ceteris paribus. That's why it's a true law as opposed to being just a supposition or a theory, right? If everything else in the economy is fixed, or everything about this good that we may change is fixed, except for price and quantity, when the price goes up, what happens?
Demand goes down.
Don't say demand, just say quantity, right? Because all I'm talking about here is price and quantity, right? So the key thing about it is that when we're dealing with price and quantity, and realize that after, well, probably starting sometime later on today, I will abbreviate price and quantity with P and Q. So your P's and Q's are price and quantity in economics, all right? So think P's and Q's all the time in this class. Now, if I wanted to draw a representation of the relationship between price and quantity, what kind of a line am I going to draw? A straight line, and which way is it going to go? Down, because it has an inverse relationship. So, This line represents my demand. All right, now, again, one of the classic misnomers that I hear being stated not only by students but by politicians and everybody is that when the price goes up, what happens to demand? Our natural instinct is to say demand goes down. That is actually the incorrect thing to say. When the price goes up, what is going to decrease? Quantity. The quantity that you buy is going to go down, not your demand. Demand is just this line.
If that were true, people wouldn't be standing for 6 blocks waiting for an iPhone.
But the fact remains, though, is that demand represents the relationship between price and quantity. So do not tell me that there is a relationship between price and demand. So don't tell me when price goes down that demand goes up. That's not true. When price goes down, quantity purchased will go up. That's what demand means, okay? It's a very, very subtle point, but it's definitely one of those things that from now on I want you to be listening for, right? When you hear someone say that the price went down, therefore demand has gone up, your gut response should be, no, you are flat out wrong. When the price goes down, you just buy more, all right? That's all that it means, all right? That's what demand means. When the price goes down, you buy more. You don't demand more. Think of demand as how much you like something, right? So we really, suppose you really love economics. If it were cheaper to buy economics, would you like it more? No. You would just potentially buy more of it, right? The same thing goes for staplers. If the price of this stapler is $5, you're going to buy a certain number of them. If the price goes down, do you like those staplers more?
You like the price more.
You like the price more. Yes, that's absolutely right. That's okay. But when you like the price more, what do? You don't demand more of it, you buy more of it. All right? So think of the difference between more demand as buy and demand, right? When the price goes down, you buy more. You don't demand more, okay? Because companies know that when they lower the price, they'll sell more, right? But when they lower the price, they're not expecting you to demand more of them necessarily, all right? So, be careful with that, right? When price falls, quantity rises. And let me add a caveat to that, not demand. So this inverse relationship, all it's describing is the relationship between price and quantity. Do not talk about demand when you are talking about price and quantity's relationship. That's all you're going to talk about. All right? All right. Now, your question then is, Marshall, how does demand change?
How much is out there?
Marshall, how does demand change?
Great question, Vic. How do we get demand to change? Well, right now, what I have stated, that there's this inverse relationship between price and quantity. And what's the very last phrase that I put up there? So guess what I have to do to let demand change? I got to change something. I must release ceteris paribus. All right, so as long as ceteris paribus is on, demand does not change. Period.
But that's a law of demand.
Yes, exactly. The law of demand is that ceteris paribus is on, right?
Yeah.
So what we're going to start doing is saying, okay, let's let this turn off and see how does this start to change. How does the relationship between price and quantity change? All right? And we're going to get to that, so bear with me. All right? So let me, does everybody have all of this down? I can, okay. Okay, so to reiterate, is this purple okay? Yeah, okay. So exclamation point. When ceteris paribus is on, demand does not change. So if there is an increase or a decrease in price, if ceteris paribus is on, don't tell me that demand goes up or down, because demand doesn't change. It stays fixed. Demand is represented by this line, right? So if I tell you this price is, say, $10, and let's say the quantity down here is 2, and let's suppose this represents what costs $10 that you would buy 2 of. Say, how about a Black Hawk Technical College baseball cap? Right, so it's around Christmas time. You're looking for Christmas presents for your family, and you've got, 18 nephews, because we all do, right? So you're going to buy, at $10 a pop, you will buy 1 or 2 hats, right? So if BTC in its infinite wisdom says, oh my God, we ordered too many of these hats, and they lower the price down to $6, so the price has changed, right? Realize that price is one of those 2 variables. Those can change, right? Price and quantity can change. Nothing else can, right? That's what ceteris paribus is meaning. Just those 2 variables you care about. When the price goes down, what happens to my quantity?
You're going to get more.
Yeah. Maybe we'll buy 4. And again, the key here, please, when the price goes down, do not tell me that your demand has changed. The only thing that's changing is the quantity. All right? All right. So, this purple makes me nervous. Let's switch back to black. Is on. Ceteris paribus. Yeah. So here is the way economists will talk about it, just so that you can get the reason why people confuse it is because economists are sort of a fuddy-duddy group of people. Sorry. And that the way an economist will talk about it is that when price goes up, they won't just say that the quantity goes down. They'll say that the quantity demanded will fall or goes down. All right? So when one of the variables that are on our axes changes, the other one will change. All right? That's all there is to it. All right? So one more time. I'm just doing this so that I make sure I've gone over it as many different ways as I can. All right, now, obviously, if I stopped right there and didn't allow ceteris paribus to change, we could practically be done with this entire class. So, naturally, you must suspect then that we have to figure out what happens when we release ceteris paribus. All right, so let's just look at an example and try and work with it. So one of the things that we will often talk about when we deal with economics are demand schedules. And demand schedules are just a table that says, at a given price, how much of this are you going to buy? All right, it's all it is. It's not something fancy. All right, so the example that I like to use is, let's suppose that we are, we're working for the food services here at Black Hawk Tech. And we've decided that we are going to start selling apples. Seems like a good idea, right? There's a big, huge health kick going on. So we, as the company that are running the health services or the food services downstairs, we decide to start selling apples, right? And so we do a survey, and we send out this survey saying, if the price of an apple were $2, how many apples would you buy per week? I'm going to do it for my own personal self. What I want you to do for yourself is create this according to you. How many would you buy? Me personally, I'd probably buy one a week. All right. I like apples, though. I'm not allergic to them or anything like that. So I would probably buy one at $2 a pop.
I would release Cateris paribus and buy them at the store.
Which might be wiser, but let's assume that there are no stores close to the school, which there aren't. So it costs you $2 to drive your car and get to the store in order to buy the apple, right? So why not just buy it here? All right, so I filled out the survey and said 1. You put down whatever number you would have bought, right? Now, what happens if they lowered the price of apples to $1? Me personally, I like apples. I like to be healthy. I would probably buy 2. Again, use a reasonable number. Folks, do not make your number less than the amount you would buy at $2. The apples didn't change. If the price goes down, you will buy at least the same amount as before. All right, well, let's suppose that they go on a little bit further, and they lower the price down to 50 cents. Now how many apples are you going to start buying? Again, do it for yourself, right? So I now think, I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I have Fridays off, so I'm going to buy, folks. I mean, I'm going to start eating an apple every day, right? So I'm going to buy 4. And let's assume that the food service people were crazy or curious, and they said, what happens if we only charged you 25 cents for this apple? Now how many are you going to buy a week when it's $0.25 an apple? I mean, you can go to the store, and you probably aren't going to find one cheaper than 25 cents.
Buy a couple of bags per week.
That's absurd. Might you not buy some and take them home? Sure you would, right? I would probably even do it too, even though I got to drive to Madison every day, right? I might actually go up and say, buy 10, right?
Can't get them that cheap at Whole Foods.
That's exactly right. So crank up as many as you can get, right? And now, what the demand schedule does is gives you a way to graph your demand. That's its goal. That's its whole purpose, is to give you what does your demand look like. So make yourself a graph with P's and Q's and graph your own demand right there on it, right? And try to be, here's 25 cents, here's 50 cents, here's $1, here's $2. And then do quantity the same way. Here's 1, here's 2, here's 4, here's 10. And then plot those points. So at $2, I'm going to buy 1. At $1, I'm going to buy 2. At 50 cents, I'm going to buy 4. And at 25 cents, I'm going to buy 10. And then once you have all your dots pointed, do your dot to dot. And if you have multiple colors, this is where you start to change colors. So you should, once you have them plotted, have some kind of a line that starts somewhere in the upper left and goes down and to the right, or at least it, goes down. if you are allergic to apples and at no price would you buy any of them, you may have a line that's you know, I mean, if you, right? I mean, if eating an apple would kill you, you may not actually buy any of these, right? But you may be living with someone else so that at 25 cents you may buy it for them and take it home, right? I mean, that's kind of why I lowered the price down there, that eventually you'd get out of the 0 range. All right. Now, this is our ceteris paribus is in effect, right? If nothing else changes, right? If the price was 50 cents, you'd buy 4. If the price went up to $1, you'd buy 2, or whatever your numbers are. All right? Now, the way I want to release ceteris paribus is that right now this is my individual demand. So what I want you guys to do is find the person next to you and combine your two demands. And if you need to do groups of 3, that's perfectly fine. Or if you don't have a group, you can always group yourself with me. That's perfectly fine. I got no problems with you grouping with me. And the way you do this, folks, is that at $2, I would buy 1, add however many you would buy at $2 to the person next to you. So if you both bought 1, add 1 and 1, and your quantity would be now 2.
What's that? No, I did my own.
Do the same thing for $1. Do the same thing for 50 cents. Do the same thing for 25 cents. Add all those numbers together in the quantity column, and then re-graph your demand. All right, what were your numbers? Did you just use the A? All right. Yeah, sure. Add my quantity to your quantity. So if at $2 you bought 1 and I bought 1, now it's 2. $1 I bought 2. How many did you buy?
I bought 2. But would you add the price to that?
Nope, you don't add the price. The price stays fixed. Ooh, don't draw lines from there. Just do the point. Now graph the new points. At $2, graph the quantity 2. At $1, graph the quantity 4. At 50 cents, graph the quantity 8, which, you know, somewhere like right here. Estimate as best you can. 25 cents, 20, yeah, okay, it's way out here. Again, your numbers may be slightly different if you're using someone next to you.
Is it weird that at $1 I only wanted 1, but at 50 cents I wanted 4?
No.
I like whole numbers. I don't know if that's...
No, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly legitimate. And notice what happens to our line. What happened to your demand line? It moved.
Mine
Crossed?
Yeah, because it just so happens that you see how he used 2 sets.
Oh, so there you had an intersection? That's okay. So if you both start at the same point, that's all right.
So it's okay if we didn't start at the same point, but we ended at the same points?
Oh no, even anytime, as long as at some point your points shifted it some way to the right, at least somewhere. In other words, the only way they wouldn't shift is if someone said 0 the whole way, which would be a little weird, but, you know, it could happen. All right, so what did we do then? What happened to our demand line?
Increased it.
We shifted it, right? It moved. This is the way demand increases. All right?
We shut off ceteris paribus.
Yeah, instead of just being one person's demand, we took it off and said, make it 2. So we increased the amount of demand that we were measuring. In order to increase the number of people, we must also increase the demand. All right, so now let's try and describe this, all right? So for this example, what we did to release ceteris paribus, in this example, so here, the release of ceteris paribus that we did was to allow the number of people that are buying this good increase. All right. So again, in this particular perspective, consider yourselves in its full sense, right? In this case, the economy has shifted from being one person to being 2 people. What the actual food service is going to want to do is to say how many people are really out there. I mean, how many students does Black Hawk have? 3, 4, 5, some odd thousand. Is to say, okay, if this represents one person, if we're going to increase it 5,000 times, their curve is going to be somewhere way out here, 5,000 times bigger, right? That will probably be the food service's expectations for what you guys are going to demand, all right? So they'll start with one person, right? Get a graph for one person. And normally what they'll try and do is to get a whole group of one persons and take the average, right? Because some of us said 1, some of you may have said 2, some of you may have said 0, and they'll average maybe the first 100 of you that respond to a specific point. So it may be that this is 2/10 is the real starting spot for their $2. Because they're going to do it on an average per person. All right? Businesses do this in a big way too, right? They're going to survey more than one person, right? They're going to survey hundreds, thousands of people, and based on your response, they're going to try and refine that down to one person. And then they start saying, okay, how many people do we really think are going to buy this product? How many of them actually really demand it to some degree? This represents 1. If this is going to represent 2, what happens when we go to 3? Yeah, the curve keeps shifting further and further to right the more you add people. All right? So the key here is realizing that the more people you say are going to buy your product, the more demand there is for your product.
But what if everybody has the same answer? Exactly the same answer?
That's fine. The average will just be exactly what any one person said. But then they're going to aggregate all of those people. They're going to add them together and say, if everybody averages out to this demand schedule, if there are at any given time 2,000 people in the lunchroom, they would multiply all those numbers by 2,000. That would then be their demand curve.
Oh, okay.
So again, in order for demand to grow, and this is actually representing growth in demand. When the demand curve shifts to the right, demand has increased. All right?
Okay, I have a question. Maybe you're coming to this.
Okay.
You define the law of demand.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of it, it's purchased in a defined period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at one customer having, you're looking at his demand curve of one individual,
Mm-hmm.
and of course you're taking that within a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you expand upon that when you add multiple customers?
Well, in this
Multiple
particular
individuals
in this particular case, they were trying to create a model for one customer.
for a certain period of time.
Yeah, for 1 week, they wanted to model just one customer, and that was this graph that they drew right here.
Okay.
And now what they're going to do with that graph is to say, well, one person doesn't represent the entire economy we're trying to sell to, right? They're going to say, what's the entire economy? How many people are really coming into Blackhawk potentially buying stuff? So they will take this demand schedule and multiply it by however many people are in the economy. And so that'll change the demand. It'll change the demand from being one person to being whatever that number they came up with, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000.
Right.
It will shift and grow to represent the demand for 3,000 people.
How do we gauge what the time structure is going to be on even one individual? Because as you wrote,
You fix it, and you fix it for as long as you're working with the model. So this is...
A customer has a fixed amount of time he has in his head that we're going to sell these apples for this period of time
Yep.
to this customer.
Period. And we're going to look at it from that perspective only. So this is only demand in a 1-week span. That's it.
Okay. Because they might not be able to get apples and sell them at a profit at 25 cents.
Oh, no, we're not getting to profit at this stage. All we're worrying about at this stage is what's the demand that we expect if we charge these prices. That's it. Right, profit's going to come in at about chapter 6. So we got a ways to go before we get there.
I
I'm
was
just...
just trying to figure out the time structure because it's a defined period of time, and something has to affect what that period of time is.
Well, I agree with you, but all I want to do is make sure we compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. Because if you drew your demand schedule here for 1 month and I wrote mine for 1 week, we can't really add those together because the time periods are not the same.
Correct.
So in order to aggregate or average, we all have to have the same time period. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, got you.
All right?
Got you. It's no set number.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So what that does is it starts us in on learning some things that change demand. So the things that change demand are called things that change demand. I like to keep it semi-real. I could call it stuff, I guess, but things works. We figured out what the first thing is, right? One of the first things that can change demand is the number of buyers. So the food service downstairs assumed that there were 2,000, roughly 2,000 buyers of apples or potential buyers of apples. And based on these prices, they were going to multiply these numbers by 2,000 and draw a line that represent their demand. If, after, say, 2 or 3 months of working off this model, they discover that this model is bad. And the reason why is not because the schedule is bad, but because the number of buyers is not 2,000, it's really 3,000. They need to change the number of buyers that they have from 2,000 to 3,000, and that makes their demand grow, right? So here's one of the first things off, right? When you have more buyers in your demand curve, it will increase your demand, and notice what it does. It shifts the curve to the right. When we shift curves, folks, they will always shift left or right. There is not any up or down, okay? For some reason, I had some students who wanted to say that demand went up and so that they shifted it up. It looks like it might be shifting up, but what it's really doing is shifting to the right, right? Each one of these points is moving over to the right. That is an increase in demand, okay? So what would happen if the number of buyers went down? It would shift to the left, exactly, right? So less buyers would imply decrease in demand, and it would shift left. Now, the cool thing about this is that your buyers increased. What happened to your demand? It also increased. They both moved in the same direction. If the buyers went down, what happened to our demand? It went down, moved in the same direction. What do we say things are when they move in the same direction? Not quite. Direct relationship. Demand and the number of buyers represented in that demand have a direct relationship. So if we increase our buyers, we will increase our demand. Right? So one of the things that we often talk about in the American purchasing world is to say, well, if America would just take over Canada, the demand for American goods would increase. Right? Because all of a sudden we would take all of those Canadian people and convert them into American people. Now the demand for our products will all automatically increase from more Americans being Americans, right? And this is another reason why a lot of American companies actually would like a liberal immigration policy, because then there would be more Americans in here in this country buying American goods, right? In general, when you're in a country, you tend to buy more of your own goods than you do of foreign goods, normally. Again, we're one of the weird countries that's not necessarily true, but in general, that's how it works, all right? So, more buyers, more demand. Now, I forgot to define what these are. Pardon me for that. So these things that will move demand will be called non-price determinants. The reason why they're called non-price, what happens when the price changes? If the price goes up, what happens? Quantity goes down, right? When the price goes up, the quantity that we demand will decrease. Demand itself doesn't change when the price changes, right? All you do when the price changes is you move. If they took the price from 50 cents and raised it to $1, if you were an individual, you would just move from this point to this point. That's all there is to it, right? So
It's not an inverse relationship.
price and quantity still have an inverse relationship.
Okay.
So when price goes up, quantity will go down. That stays the same, period. This are non-price things, all right? So number of buyers, that's one of them, all right? So another one that we use that we can allow to change, or another non-price determinant, are tastes and preferences. What I like to say tastes and preferences are, basically it's advertising. So if all of a sudden you heard that if you ate an apple a day, you're guaranteed to, reduce your risk of cancer by 10%, right? I mean, this is something that the Apple industry came out with a slogan saying, if you ate an apple a day, what's it going to do?
Keep the dentist away.
Keep the doctor away, right? That phrase, which we all know, the people who came up with that was the marketing firm for the Apple industry. Why? Because what did that advertisement do? What did it do to make, to your demand for apples? How much did you like apples when it told you it could save your life? Made you want to buy more of them, even if the price didn't change, right? That's advertising's goal. That's its entire goal, is to increase demand, right? So more, and I'm going to more good advertising, right? I mean, can you think of anything that would advertise negatively? Cigarettes, right? What did we have to do to cigarette boxes? We put warnings all of them that said, you are going to die if you use this product. So that would be more negative advertising. What were we trying to do by doing that kind of advertising? We were trying to make the demand for cigarettes go down, right? So good advertising would increase demand, and bad advertising would decrease demand. And you know, a lot of people like to say, well, I won't be swayed by advertising, right? All this advertising isn't going to change my buying habits. If you believe that, look up the numbers for how much money companies spend on advertising. If you think it's not worth it, do you think they would waste that money?
What I want to know is how California gets off being so ballsy advertising their cows in Wisconsin.
Oh,
They're happy cows.
right, exactly. What are they trying to do?
Change their
They're trying to make us in Wisconsin quit going to buy Wisconsin cheese and instead look to see if it says California cheese, right? It's a double whammy, right? Because part of it is that they're trying to advertise California cheese, but what are they also trying to do?
make ours look bad.
Yeah, they're trying to trash Wisconsin's cheese and say your demand for Wisconsin cheese is going to go down. But what they're going to assume is that your overall demand for cheese really doesn't change. So if you buy less Wisconsin cheese, what are you going to do? By default, buy more California cheese, right? I mean, it's one of those things where sometimes advertising is negative on one industry so that it's positive on a different. All right. We've only gotten through like about 2 pages of Chapter 3. So there is no homework for Chapter 3 yet. I will not assign homework until we get to the end of the chapter. So for this weekend, the homework assignment, if you wish to do it, is read Chapter 3. But there is nothing you would need to turn in. Vic, could you? Thank you.
Okay. I forget what it's like to be around the lesson. My daughter does. So I have like a shift where I